Many countries around the world have experienced conflicts, leaving countless victims, some even bloodier than what has happened and is currently happening in Yemen. Yemen shares many political causes and historical contexts, with conflicts in countries like Rwanda and Chile, which successfully implemented effective solutions to halt the cycle of violence and lay the foundation for lasting peace. Meanwhile, Yemen continues to grapple with recurring conflicts from the 1960s to the present day. Here, a fundamental question arises. Why did Chile and Rwanda succeed in ending their conflicts? And why has this faltered in Yemen? In 1962, North Yemen overthrew one of the world's most despotic regimes, the Imamate, which had lasted for nearly a century. Yemen then moved into a new era of education, reconstruction, and global openness after years of isolation, during which Yemenis suffered from injustice, backwardness, ignorance, and disease. Similarly, on October 14, 1963, South Yemen ended a dark era of tyranny and injustice imposed by British colonialism. However, both North and South Yemen entered internal political conflicts during the 1970s and 1980s, which have resurfaced intermittently to this day. During this same period, in the 1970s, Chile lived through a dark and oppressive dictatorship. Under General Augusto Pinochet, who led a bloody military coup. In September 1973 against Chilean President Salvador Allende. He practiced brutal repression against opponents during his rule. Grave violations marked his dark reign as he forcibly disappeared thousands, and the death toll reached nearly 3,000, according to reports. In 1973, Rwanda was also at the height of conflict, witnessing a military coup by Juvenal Habyarimana, a Hutu, against Gregoire Kayibanda, also a Hutu, driven only by regional differences. His coup was political, with a regional motive. After Gregoire Kayibanda came to power in Rwanda in 1962, he ended more than 3 decades of Tutsi monopoly and control over the country. He initiated a retaliatory political phase dominated by the Hutu tribe, characterized by political exclusion, violence, and murder against the Tutsi. The peak of this Hutu violence against Tutsi came after Juvenal Habyarimana's coup, as violence and oppression against Tutsis escalated. Nearly half of the Tutsi population was forced to flee Rwanda to neighboring countries, fearing the retaliatory killings perpetrated by the Hutus. The conflicts in Chile, Rwanda, and Yemen did not cease during the 1980s. However, they ended in Chile and Rwanda in the early to mid-1990s, while continuing intermittently in Yemen until 2014.
الحروب اللي في اليمن شمالا وجنوبا بدأ تسلسلها الحقيقي من 1986 من حرب يناير. طبعا حرب يناير سبقها عدة صراعات، كلها صراعات على السلطة على فكرة. صراع في البداية ب 67 صراع الجبهة القومية مع جبهة التحرير وانتهى لصالح الجبهة القومية، وبعد داخل الجبهة القومية صراع اليسار المتطرف مع اليمين وانتهى لصالح اليسار. ثم بعد ذلك صراع أنصار ماو تسي الصيني ماو تسي مع بريغنيف السوفيتي، انتهى لصالح أصحاب السوفيت رضي سالمين. ثم الصراع اللي تحول إلى صراع مناطقي بين زمرة أبين وشبوة مع طغمة الضالع. كل الأشكال التي يتترجم فيها الصراع تعود للجذر الأساسي وهو الصراع على السلطة. الحرب 86 دخل الجنوب مع الشمال في وحدة، أنتج حرب صيف 94، وهناك من يسميها حرب الصراع على السلطة، هناك من يسميها حرب الوحدة وهناك من يسميها حرب الانفصال، لكن أكاديميين كثير يسموها حرب الصراع على السلطة، حرب 94.
In the 1980s, the conflict in Rwanda was escalating. Following the formation of the Rwandan Patriotic Front, RPF, comprised of Tutsi refugees fleeing Hutu persecution in Uganda. Rwanda witnessed military attacks by the RPF on the Rwandan-Ugandan border, and the intensity of the conflict continued to rise. This situation persisted until the early 1990s. It did not end with a political solution. Instead, in April 1994, the plane carrying Rwandan President Juvenal Habyarimana, a Hutu, was targeted, killing him and his entourage. This sparked a bloody, retaliatory conflict between Tutsis and Hutus, known as the deadliest genocide in history. In just 100 days, over 800,000 Rwandans were slaughtered in massacres that spared neither women nor children. In a strikingly similar historical context to that of Yemen, Rwanda, and Chile, Yemen also experienced several wars and conflicts. In 1988, South Yemen witnessed bloody conflicts known as the January 86 events. The clash between power-sharing partners at the time left hundreds dead, wounded, and displaced. The conflict was renewed in the early 1990s in what became known as the Summer War of 1994. Which President Ali Saleh's regime won after a month and a half of fighting. The end of the 1994 Summer War did not mark the beginning of sustainable peace in Yemen, unlike what happened in Rwanda. There, the bloody conflict ended in 1994 with the cessation of the genocide and the broader war. It marked the dawn of peace and stability after the Rwandan Patriotic Front, led by Paul Kagame, a Tutsi, took control. After a transitional period, he became president and worked to implement transitional justice, turning Rwanda into a successful model of overcoming conflict to achieve peace and reconstruction.
أنا زرت رواندا في عام 2023 واطلعنا على التجربة الرواندية في مجال العدالة الانتقالية والمصالحة الوطنية. حقيقة أنها كانت تجربة فريدة. بعد 3 أشهر في عام 94 من أبريل إلى يوليو كانت حرب أهلية ذهب ضحيتها أكثر من 800 ألف رواندي من كافة الفئات. فالجبهة الرواندية الجبهة الوطنية الرواندية المنتصرة لم تأخذهم العزة بالإثم، بل دعوا إلى تطبيق العدالة الانتقالية، دعوا إلى المصالحات الوطنية، ونجحوا نجاح كبير الحقيقة في أنهم يوقفوا تلك المذابح وتلك المجازر الشنيعة والبشعة.
In Chile, in 1990, the dictatorial regime came to an end. Pinochet yielded power after more than 17 years of human rights abuses and political repression. And the democratically elected Patricio Aylwin assumed the presidency. Chile gradually began to recover from the conflict and implement transitional justice.
مرت العدالة الانتقالية في تشيلي بعدة مراحل، وكانت البداية من خلال التعاون الوثيق بين الكنيسة ومنظمات المجتمع المدني للتوثيق وما شابه ذلك. وبعد انتهاء الانقلاب في بداية تسعينيات القرن الماضي وانهيار النظام الدكتاتوري وتشكيل الحكومات أو الحكومات المتعاقبة بعد ذلك من تيار اليسار ويسار الوسط، أصبح التعاون وثيق بين هذه المنظمات والحكومات المتعاقبة. نتج عنه تقرير الأول والتقرير الثاني لمعالجة جبر الضرر ومعالجة قضايا الضحايا.
Meanwhile, what happened in Yemen at the end of the 1994 Summer War was merely the beginning of a new chapter in a future riddled with conflict.
بالنسبة لليمن احنا عندنا أكبر عائق سياسي وهو عدم أو غياب الإرادة السياسية. الإرادة السياسية طبعا عادة إذا يعني توفرت ويعني قرر أطراف الصراع الدخول في عدالة انتقالية ومصالحة ورسم مسار العدالة الانتقالية، هنا طبعا يعمل كثير من إعادة بناء الثقة ويعني تطبق العدالة الانتقالية.
العدالة الانتقالية وعدم تطبيق العدالة الانتقالية، كل حرب تتناسل أو تولد الحرب التي بعدها، بسبب أنه ما ننتج حلول لأسباب الحرب السابقة، بحيث أنه ما يحدثش انتقام وثارات.
In Chile and Rwanda, the application of transitional justice yielded stability and peace, which in turn spurred economic prosperity in both nations. Today, Chile stands as the most stable and competitive economy in Latin America. Meanwhile, Rwanda has emerged as one of the world's fastest-growing economies, thanks to investments in technology and tourism, making it a top destination for business. This economic boom in both countries translated into a doubled per capita income.
كل عدالة انتقالية ولها قصور، يعني طبعا أبرز القصور الذي كان في العدالة الانتقالية والذي احنا لاحظناه عن قرب، يعني ومن خلال الزيارة التعليمية ومن خلال زيارتنا أيضا لكثير من الأماكن التي أسست فيها النصب التذكاري والقرية المصالحة في دولة رواندا. الملاحظ كان بأنه في رواندا حصل نوع من عدالة المنتصر، يعني بأنه العدالة الانتقالية كانت مركزة على الطرف المنتصر أكثر من الطرف الآخر، فركزوا كثير بالمحاسبة الجنائية على الجهة الأخرى والذي هم كانوا جماعة الهوتو.
Reviewing the history of political conflicts in Yemen, Chile, and Rwanda reveals a common trigger for these outbreaks: seizing power through military, retaliatory means. The dominant party routinely adopted policies of exclusion and violently repressed its opponents. However, Yemen's successive political regimes stand apart in their persistent failure to address the root causes of ongoing conflict, unlike Chile and Rwanda. This raises the question: what is preventing Yemen from achieving peace and adopting transitional justice?
طبعا بالنسبة للعدالة الانتقالية في تشيلي ورواندا هي يعني لا يمكن أن تسقط على اليمن بشكل متكامل. يعني في نجاحات صحيح حققت في العدالة الانتقالية في رواندا وتشيلي، لكن عادة أن العدالة الانتقالية لكل بلد يعني وضعها وظروفها، وكل بلد له خصوصياته في الصراعات وفي التركيبة المجتمعية، وبالتالي دائما لا يمكن أن يتم استنساخ العدالة الانتقالية من أي بلد إلى بلد آخر بكل حذافيره.
The Chilean and Rwandan experiences with transitional justice were built on documenting human rights violations, uncovering the truth, exposing perpetrators, reviving national memory, honoring the victims, and providing reparations. There are clear parallels in the conflict histories of Yemen, Chile, and Rwanda. However, there are also distinct differences, as highlighted by 2 recently published studies. The first study examines the application of transitional justice in Chile and Rwanda and how Yemen might learn from them, particularly regarding foreign intervention. In Yemen, most political conflicts have been heavily influenced and manipulated by external regional powers and neighboring countries, which is a stark contrast to Rwanda and Chile.
يعني إذا ما وجدت الإرادة السياسية لا يمكن نحن ندخل في مرحلة عدالة انتقالية، إضافة إلى أنه التدخلات الدولية والإقليمية في الملف اليمني بحسب المصالح وبحسب طبعا المعايير المزدوجة يعني التدخلات الخارجية. هذا طبعا من أكبر المعيقات التي تعيق مرحلة العدالة الانتقالية في اليمن.
External interventions have severely hindered the implementation of transitional justice in Yemen. Additionally, Yemen's local conflicts are politically and militarily fragmented. State institutions, such as the judiciary, security forces, media, and education, that should facilitate transitional justice, are instead suffering from division and disintegration. They are divvied up among the conflicting parties based on political quotas. This impedes the rebuilding and qualification of these institutions to play an effective role in applying transitional justice. In contrast, institutions in Chile and Rwanda did not suffer from such deep divisions and were deliberately rebuilt to fulfill their true roles in this framework.
مرت العدالة الانتقالية في تشيلي بعدة مراحل، ولكن كان الأساس من خلال التوثيق لمنظمات المجتمع المدني، ولهذا ما تزال حتى هذه اللحظة في تشيلي هناك محاولات لكيفية معالجة جميع القضايا، ولكنها نجحت بشكل كبير وأصبحت مثالا يحتذى به في مجال العدالة الانتقالية على المستوى الدولي. ولهذا نحن في اليمن بحاجة إلى الاستفادة من هذه التجارب من خلال التوثيق في الوقت الراهن، كون البلد يمر بصراعات عسكرية وسياسية وعدم استقرار، ولهذا ما يتم تجميعه الآن بالإمكان أن يكون مقدمة مستقبلا لمعالجة قضايا جبر الضرر وكشف الحقيقة والقضايا الأخرى.
The 2 studies summarize key lessons from Rwanda and Chile that Yemen can use to break its recurring cycle of violence. In Chile, civil society played a primary role in implementing transitional justice by documenting violations in organized, accurate databases. These later became the foundation for securing reparations and achieving justice by prosecuting perpetrators. Chilean civil society organizations were essential not only in documenting abuses, but also in reviving national memory and spreading public awareness about transitional justice as a national alternative to revenge and retaliation. Engaging these vital forces is the only guarantee against the politicization of the transitional justice process or its reduction to a bargaining chip among warring factions. Civil society organizations in Yemen are capable of playing this role, and some are already doing so. According to the studies, Rwanda relied on Gacaca courts, traditional community tribunals, to try those responsible for atrocities. In Yemen, tribal customs represent a rich legacy of conflict resolution based on established rules and regulations. These can be systematically activated to facilitate transitional justice procedures, particularly regarding reparations. The lesson for Yemen is the potential to institutionalize and legalize these traditional tribal mechanisms, transforming them into auxiliary tools for restorative justice alongside the formal judiciary. This also applies to victim compensation, making reparations an integral part of social reintegration. Furthermore, building and reforming state institutions, especially the judicial and administrative branches, is a crucial prerequisite for the success and sustainability of transitional justice. This dictates that Yemen must link any transitional justice process to actionable institutional reform.
And not even the Office of the Human Rights Commissioner in Yemen is sufficiently addressing or sufficiently mandated, to put it more correctly, to conduct monitoring human rights work in Yemen. On the more positive side of things, the overwhelming majority of initiatives in the transitional justice realm has really been taken by Yemeni civil society organizations. They are taking the lead on transitional justice work in Yemen, which includes, for example, the documentation of human rights violations, but also of other international law violations in the country. The last years have witnessed an increasing number of organizations addressing transitional justice concerns, and also an increasing number of coalitions of Yemeni organizations addressing these issues. The majority of these organizations works directly with victims and also with survivors, and their work is very important because it's one of the very few mediums available in Yemen to elevate the voices of victims and survivors.
What Chile achieved, a success story in ending conflict and establishing peace, and the miracle Rwanda performed by pulling itself out of a bloody quagmire of ethnic and political revenge killings to become a nation defined by coexistence, development, and reconstruction, is not beyond Yemen's reach. It is possible if the will exists, and if everyone listens to the language of reason and wisdom through the application of transitional justice. Silencing the guns without healing the victim's wounds and ensuring justice simply gives the conflict a new lease on life, threatening the future of Yemen and its children.